Hello, this is Jane, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 19 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the first article I'm going to read is the headline on the front page, and it is titled, "A Surprise Guilty Plea. Jennifer Pan Admits to Role in Mother's Death, Saying Father Was the Target." And there's a picture on the front here of Jennifer Pan, and then also of pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the death of Bich Ha Pan, who was killed by hitmen hired by Pan in a staged home invasion in Markham in 2010. Her father, Han, survived. The story spawned a Netflix documentary. And this story is by Jacques Gallant. Jennifer Pan stood in a mostly empty courtroom on Wednesday and apologized through tears to her family after taking ownership of her role in her mother's death. "I'm ashamed of what I did," she said. The now 39-year-old woman pleaded guilty to manslaughter for the death of Bich Ha Pan, killed by hitmen hired by Pan during a staged home invasion in Markham in 2010. In which her father, Han Pan, was seriously injured. But as her lawyers emphasized Wednesday, Bich Ha Pan was never supposed to be harmed. It was a stunning development in the case that captivated the public and was turned into a book and Netflix documentary. While Pan had originally been convicted by a jury of first-degree murder, a successful appeal went to the Supreme Court, saw the case return to the Newmarket Courthouse this week for Pan's guilty plea. The plan, according to an agreed statement of facts, was only to kill Han Pan, whose daughter described him as an abusive and controlling man who treated her like a piece of property, an investment designed to enhance his reputation amongst his friends. She never intended for her mother to be hurt, but by pleading guilty to manslaughter, she accepted she ought to have known her mother would be in the house and that it was objectively foreseeable that she could have been hurt or killed. Pan received a life sentence, as jointly requested by the Crown and defense, to be served concurrently with the life sentence she's already serving for the attempted murder of her father. The time she has spent incarcerated since her arrest in 2010 means she is already eligible to apply for parole. She has no guarantee parole will be granted. The circumstances of this offense of manslaughter are particularly aggravating. Ms. Pan's initiation of a murder for hire of her father, for which she was sentenced long ago, was heinous, whatever her rationale, said Superior Court Justice Michelle First on Wednesday. The decision to go ahead with the plan, notwithstanding the risk to her mother, was equally reprehensible, the judge said. Her conduct demonstrated an extreme lack of moral compass. Standing between her lawyers, Nathan Gorham and Brianna Vandebeek, in a white dress shirt and black pants, with her legs shackled and her long black hair running down her back, Pan addressed each of her family members whose lives she ruined. "To my mother, I love you more than anything," Pan said, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry I did not come to you. I'm sorry that we did not talk. I'm sorry that I thought this fantasy would fix all of our lives, and we ended up without you. I'm sorry for all the love you were never able to give to others or to receive from us." To her father, Pan said she was sorry for the permanent pain she caused him, saying there's no excuse for what she did, that while she felt trapped with him and hopeless and degraded, she looked for a solution in a delusional and irrational way. Pan saved most of her words for her brother Felix, who shared in a victim impact statement that the incessant media attention on the case has destroyed his life. Felix, who was not in the home at the time of the killing, wrote in January that every time his family's story is retold, it is done at the expense of my sanity and my ability to move freely in the world. He recounted that he now has a hard time trusting people, as people he believed were friends would then share details about his life just to get 5 minutes in the spotlight. I've seen my family's tragedy turned into entertainment for strangers, he wrote. It comes back to haunt me constantly in the form of books, YouTube videos, movies, and high-profile documentaries. I cannot even enjoy Netflix without seeing the faces of those who destroyed my life trending as the #1 show for weeks. It never stops. Non-communication orders requested by Han and Felix and imposed by the court over a decade ago mean that Pan cannot contact them. They were not in court on Wednesday. I need my brother to know I never wanted any of the media attention, Pan said. I'm sorry that I've caused his privacy to be invaded. I did not encourage or profit from any of the media productions of this case. As her relationship with her father deteriorated in 2010, Pan enlisted the help of her former boyfriend, Daniel Wong, to have Han Pan killed. According to the agreed statement of facts read out Wednesday by Crown Attorney Peter Westgate. Wong then put her in touch with Lenford Crawford, who in turn enlisted the help of Eric Carty and David Mailvagana. 3 armed men entered the family home in Markham on November 8, 2010, just after 10:15 p.m., while Pan was at home with her parents. One of them tied Pan to a banister upstairs while her parents were taken downstairs to the basement at gunpoint. They were ordered to put blankets over their heads and were then shot. Pan was left unharmed and called 911 to report a home invasion. She was well aware that these events would have a horrific effect on her family and the community, Westgate told First in his arguments on sentencing. Gorham, for his part, pointed to his client's difficult upbringing, saying she was made to work after school almost every day while at the same time engaged in figure skating, piano, and karate. She was a good and hardworking and diligent young daughter, and she was pressed beyond limits that any child of her age should have had to endure, Gorham said. It's not just that she was an unhappy child, she was abused. Pan has returned to being a good person while in prison, Gorham said. Court heard she's been working as the chaplain's assistant since 2017 and is focused on upgrading her education. The Crown at Pan's original trial argued that Pan had a difficult relationship with her parents and arranged for them to be killed so she could inherit her share of their life insurance policy, $500,000. She had been lying to them about studying to become a pharmacist while she was living with Wong. Although Pan was initially considered a victim of a home invasion gone wrong, her story to police didn't add up, and when Han woke up from a medically induced coma a few days later, he told investigators about the intruders appearing to be friendly with his daughter. He ended up testifying for the Crown. After a 10-month trial in 2014, Superior Court Justice Carrie Boswell left the jury with 2 scenarios to consider during their deliberations: that the plan was to murder both parents, or the plan was to commit a home invasion that turned violent. Higher courts ordered a new trial on the first-degree murder charge after finding that Boswell was wrong not to leave a third scenario with the jury, that the plan was just to murder Pon's father. The murder case against Pon's co-accused has also crumbled in the wake of the successful appeals. In February, Wong was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to life. And last Friday, Crawford pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. While Crawford never went to the home, he acted as a go-between for Carty, Pon, and Wong. Like for Pon, the new convictions for Wong and Crawford make them eligible to apply for parole. Carty pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder in 2015, admitting that he drove Mile Vaganam and the two other intruders to the Pon home. He died in prison in 2018. Mile Vaganam's case is now the only one that has yet to be resolved. The two other intruders have never been caught, and it was never established who fired the fatal shot. And the next article from the front page is under the byline of Umar Zamir case. I looked at the evidence very, very carefully. Engineer stands by testimony in cop's death, disturbed with OPP findings. And this is by Betsy Powell and Jennifer Pagliaro. A Toronto engineer is standing by his collision reconstruction report and trial testimony in the Umar Zamir murder case, despite a controversial Ontario Provincial Police report that claims to contradict his findings. I looked at the evidence very, very carefully before making my way into a courtroom 2 years ago, Barry Rafferty said a day after the release of the OPP report that, in the words of Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkew, exonerated 3 officers of obstructing justice and perjury during the trial. Raftery's was one of the 2 reconstruction reports presented at the trial that found Toronto Constable Jeffrey Northrop was on the ground and not visible to Zamir when the accountant ran over him in the parking garage below Nathan Phillips Square on July 2, 2021. The OPP's report contradicts the conclusions reached not only by Raftery, a defense witness at Zamir's trial, but also that of Toronto Police Staff Sergeant Jeff Basingthwaite, who was a prosecution witness, even though his reconstruction aligned with the defense. Both Raftery and Basingthwaite's reports were key evidence supporting the defense theory that Zamir did not knowingly drive into the officer. A jury found him not guilty of murder. Soon after, Superior Court Justice Ann Malo apologized to Zamir and made allegations that Detective Constables Lisa Forbes, Charnel Payas, and Tony Correa had been dishonest. On Wednesday, Raftery said he was disappointed and disturbed that the OPP and Toronto Police Service are saying he and Basingthwaite got things wrong based on what he called unsupported assumptions about the evidence, including injury patterns, contact points on Zamir's BMW, and Northrop's final resting position. Basingthwaite was an honest cop, and he did something I think was probably difficult for him to do. In light of the fact it was a police officer who was killed, Raftery said, to come clean and just call balls and strikes and say exactly how it was. I have a lot of respect for Basingthwaite. Basingthwaite, who now works with the Toronto Police Analytics and Innovation Division, could not immediately be reached for comment. Also Wednesday, Premier Doug Ford suggested Malloy should apologize to 3 Toronto police officers for accusing them of everything under the sun. The OPP's reconstructionist, Detective Constable Mike Cooper, concluded that Northrop was standing in front of the BMW, which backed up the officer's testimony and, in part, led to the Provincial Service's conclusion that there was no evidence the trio committed a crime. At a news conference at police headquarters on Tuesday, DEMQ urged the public to read the report to understand the OPP reconstructionists' opinions. The OPP report claims Raftery and Basingthwaite both missed evidence, such as the BMW's collision sensors, which may have sounded an alert. What difference would that make amid the shouting and panic, and with Zamir's son crying in the back seat? Raftery asked. Raftery, who has conducted hundreds of pedestrian vehicle collision reconstructions over his 38-year career, noted the OPP report did not include Cooper's reasons for reaching this conclusion. "They are a mystery to me," he said. Raftery's comments come amid growing calls for an independent review. "I just can't square the OPP report with what happened at that trial," said former Special Investigations Unit Director Ian Scott, adding that the review effectively recasts Zamir's acquittal as a wrongful one. The core dispute lies in the competing collision reconstruction analysis. Two tested in open court, the other produced behind closed doors. "What I find completely stunning is the frontal attack on the Toronto Police Service's accident reconstructionist," he said. He noted that during the Zamir trial, both the defense and Toronto police experts testified under oath and were cross-examined, while the OPP report includes only conclusions with no full reconstruction report or opportunity to question its author. The Star has requested the document from the OPP. "In my view, this cries out for a public inquiry," Scott said. On Wednesday, Raftery reiterated what he says is the most persuasive physical evidence that the tall Northrop was not upright when he was hit: the absence of any evidence on the hood of Zamir's BMW, neither dents nor disturbances in the dust. The OPP analysis appears to be ignoring the fact there's no evidence of a 300-pound man striking the engine hood of that car, he said. Veteran criminal defense lawyer Monty McGregor dismissed the OPP report entirely, saying it re-evaluated the factual underpinnings of the case without any opportunity to question the authors on their findings. "There's no forum now to test this report," he said, adding the issue of perjury should have been reviewed by independent assessors with experience in the criminal justice system, such as a retired judge. He also noted it comes at a time when members of the Toronto Police are under scrutiny for alleged corruption as part of the Project South investigation. "It leaves a very sour taste as far as the administration of justice," he said. And before I go on to the next article, I need to pause to remind you that you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is also from the front page under the byline of Business. BOC warns of an economic shock. Experts raise alarm of recession fears amid Mideast tensions. And this is by Anastasia Blosser. As the war in the Middle East escalates with no end in sight, economists are warning there could be a recession on Canada's horizon. Rising oil prices, weaker than expected job reports, Canada's first recorded annual population decline, and trade tensions are complicating the outlook for growth and inflation, experts say. On Wednesday morning, the Bank of America announced it would hold its key rate at 2.25%, but Governor Tiff Macklem warned there may be difficult decisions ahead. The biggest cost of the war in Iran is human tragedy, he said, but it's also an economic shock. In a briefing following the rate announcement, Macklem noted that geopolitical tensions, shifting trade relationships, and structural changes such as artificial intelligence and demographics are clouding Canada's economic outlook. Uncertainty is acute, he said. The range of possible outcomes has broadened. Since the U.S. and Israel launched a joint attack on Iran on February 28, the cost of oil has risen dramatically to almost $100, that's U.S. dollars a barrel, which could continue to squeeze consumers if Iran's blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, a global oil conduit, persists. Higher oil prices would eventually lead to more expensive food, consumer goods, and transportation, economists say, which increases the likelihood that a rate hike could come later in the year. We could absolutely have a recession coming, said CIBC Deputy Chief Economist Benjamin Tal. If you look at every recession over the past 40, 50 years, with exception of COVID, they were led by an oil shock. Macklem said the Bank of Canada will respond as needed as risks evolve and play out in the economy. We are prepared to look through the immediate impact of higher energy prices on inflation, Macklem said. But we are not going to allow that to spill over and become persistent inflation. GDP shrank by 0.6% at the tail end of 2025, following a 2.4% increase in the previous quarter. Though growth was weaker than the bank had forecast, Macklem explained that discrepancy was because inventories were drawn down by more than we expected. In an announcement Wednesday, the U.S. Federal Reserve also said it was maintaining its target range for the benchmark federal funds rate at 3.5 to 3.75%. The bank noted uncertainty over the economic outlook and said it will continue to monitor labor market conditions, international developments, and inflation pressures and expectations. The U.S. announcement could be bad news for Canada, said Avery Schenfeld, chief economist at CIBC Capital Markets. Although we are an oil exporter, we obviously export other products to the U.S., and the rise in energy prices is delaying further rate cuts in the U.S. to help their economy, Schenfeld said. If higher gas prices constrain consumer spending in the U.S., there are sectors of the Canadian economy that will feel that hurt. Manulife Global Chief Economist Alex Grassino views Canada as the test case for what you could see in the U.S. He said both countries are coping with decreased migration and a change in the working age population that could affect how the nation's economies interact. Grassino added he predicts fragile and modest growth in Canada for the next year or so as the country contends with a shifting trade dynamic. Canada is also grappling with its first population decline on record, according to 2025 data released by Statistics Canada on Wednesday, which could also weaken the economic outlook. When the population is shrinking, it does cut the demand for goods. There's less consumer spending, BMO's chief economist, Douglas Porter, explained. Tal noted Canada saw rapid population growth following the pandemic, which may set the economy up for more damage now that the population has declined. As we all know, Canada needs immigrants like oxygen, but it was simply too much of a good thing too fast, he said. Over the course of breakfast, we got 1.5 million people into this country. That was a policy mistake. The population decrease could also explain Canada's most recent jobs numbers, which were worse than anticipated. Porter said the Bank of Canada pretty clearly suggested the economy had been weaker than expected before the war's outbreak, and their policy making should reflect that. When the job market is as soft as it has been recently, the Bank of Canada should not be considering raising interest rates, Porter said. Schenfeld says he believes Canada has skirted a recession, but there was a cost, as there is now a higher unemployment rate. The end result is a less than ideal labor market that policies will not be able to remediate until 2027, he said. It's a case of disappointment, Schenfeld explained. We still have some signs of economic growth. They're just not as robust as we would like them to be. Now, the next article, the headline's on the front page, and then it's continued inside. So the headline says, Police Hub offers locals more hope. New outpost in Lawrence Heights aims to build trust and deter crime. And there's another headline on the inside that says, Shooting spurred mother's parental instinct and hope. Lawrence Heights resident demanded results from city and got them. And this is by Ben Cohen. Denise Kwame recalls feeling numb the morning after the shooting in Lawrence Heights in June. Another unspeakable tragedy in her community. More young people sent to the hospital, the morgue. The attackers opened fire on a group of 6 people, half of them teenagers. Yahya Ahmed Mohammed, 31, the eldest person there, was killed. It was his second time being shot. The first, in 2018, had paralyzed him. He was brutally murdered, Kwame said Wednesday. We lost someone who was doing a lot for the youth in this community while in a wheelchair. Kwame said she thought about all the other people in her community who have died violently during her 17 years living in Lawrence Heights. 15 homicides in the area since 2009, according to police data. Would one of her 5 children be next? Moved by parental instinct, Kwame said, the morning after Ahmed Mohammed's death, she wrote a letter to Mayor Olivia Chow. It included a list of things Kwame wanted the city to immediately provide. She echoed many long-standing requests of local advocates, more police, cameras, community centers, and jobs for youth. Only this time, she clarified, she wasn't asking the city for these things, she was demanding them. That letter got her invited to a meeting with the mayor and police chief Myron Demkew soon after. They were more receptive than their predecessors. Now, all of her recommendations are being implemented. It took a mass shooting for our voice to be heard, Kwame lamented. 10 community leaders came together to ask for these things 4 years ago and were dismissed. Chow said the forcefulness with which Kwame delivered her demands made an impression on her. She stared me in the eye and said, I need you to do this, the mayor said. She said she was tired, she was angry, she was sad, but she still believed change could happen. On Wednesday, police crossed off the last remaining item on Kwame's list. They opened a community safety hub in the area, a permanent outpost where residents and officers can interact outside a formal police station. At the ribbon cutting, Kwame said she was ecstatic. She embraced the chief and shook the mayor's hand. It really is an effort to have officers embedded in the community become part of it, said Demkew. We've taken their workplace and placed it right here, in the very neighborhood they're serving. Neighborhood officers will be stationed at the hub. These are officers with special uniforms assigned to specific neighborhoods for at least 4 years in order to get closer to residents or community organizations. Local councilor Mike Cole said the hub will build trust and deter crime. People will develop a rapport with officers, have coffees with them. He said meet with them regularly, not just when they need to report something. A 2022 meta-analysis of peer-reviewed studies on the effects of community policing on crime, including one conducted in Canada, found evidence to suggest its efficacy. This is much more than a lousy-looking small building, said Cole. It's a real community place. It's a community center of hope in memory of someone who should still be here and in memory of others who went before him. I remember so many funerals. And I need to pause one more time to remind you you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is titled, Boy Dies After Being Hit on Tracks in Mississauga. This is by Andy Takagi and Alicia Wang. A young boy has died after being struck by a GO train in Mississauga on Wednesday afternoon. The boy was 12 to 13 years old and was riding a motorized bike with another young child. Peel Police Constable Tyler Bell Morena told reporters Wednesday evening at a news conference, "This is an absolutely horrible situation for the family involved," said Bell Morena. He confirmed later Wednesday night that the second child is also a 12 to 13-year-old boy who was uninjured and did not cross the tracks. The boys were riding a pocket bike, he said. Bell Moreno said during the news conference that it did not appear the children were accompanied by an adult at the time of the incident. Peel Police arrived at the scene near the train crossing at Alexandra Avenue and 4th Street around 2:45 p.m. Bell Morena said preliminary information indicates the child drove the bike around the traffic signal barrier and was struck by the westbound train on the Lakeshore West Line. He added the traffic signal was functioning at the time with the arm down and lights flashing. It would be remiss of me not to remind motorists in the area, especially during this time of March break, there's a lot more kids out and about to be mindful of your surroundings, Bell Morena said. But this is a time, unfortunately, to remind our kids that when they're on these bikes, to really mind the crossings, particularly at railway passings here. Sylvia Della Ciega, who lives near the scene of the accident, was in her home office when she heard the GO train's horn, followed by screeching that sounded like trying to slow down the train. Often you hear the train with the big horns. If someone's near the tracks, they usually will sound off quite loud, and today it sounded off very, very loud, she said. When she went to her office window, she saw a boy screaming, and I thought maybe they're just joking around like kids do. Della Ciega, who's lived in the area for over 30 years, said it's not the first time a collision has occurred on the tracks. Today was very different, she said. GO train service resumed Wednesday evening after being canceled between Long Branch GO and Port Credit GO stations. This is a tragic incident, and our condolences go to the family and loved ones of the person who was struck. Our first priority is the safety of the public and our staff, Metrolinx said in a statement Wednesday night. As with all serious incidents, there will be a full investigation. While the details of the incident are under investigation by Peel Regional Police, this is an important and sobering reminder of the importance of rail safety and how dangerous trains are, the transit agency said. Peel Police's 12th Division Criminal Investigations Bureau will be investigating the boy's death alongside the coroner's office, Bell Morena said. And the next article is titled Hamilton Police Warn Against Legalizing Pepper Spray by Sebastian Braun. Hamilton, Ontario's push to legalize pepper spray for self-defense could deepen an already rampant crisis in Hamilton, where noxious substances have become the weapon of choice among teens teens, the city's top cop says. Our officers are responding to daily incidents where youths are using bear spray to commit serious criminal offenses, Chief Frank Bergen told the Hamilton Spectator. Making similar substances more readily accessible risks making an already concerning problem worse in our community. His comments come days after Ontario's Attorney General formally lobbied Ottawa to legalize pepper spray, writing in a weekend letter that it could give vulnerable, law-abiding citizens a practical, immediate tool to defend themselves. Premier Doug Ford echoed the claims at a news conference Monday. I'll speak for Toronto, the GTHA, he said. People aren't feeling safe out there. They're hearing about home invasions. They're hearing about not being safe on the subways. But Bergen contends that doesn't reflect what we are experiencing in Hamilton, a city in the throes of an unprecedented youth violence and bear spray crisis. Police data shows local incidents involving bear spray, which is similar to pepper spray, but for a difference in concentration levels, jumped 115% between 2021 and 2025, with those between the ages of 10 and 19 accounting for 63% of identified offenders. And it's a problem that's extended into 2026. Police report 5 youth-involved bear spray occurrences over a 3-day span this month, including an incident in which a 10-year-old was found with the pepper-based spray at a park, and a 14-year-old girl caught with a large knife and bear spray in a foiled assault at Nora Francis Henderson Secondary School. Just last week, at the same high school, a 17-year-old was arrested following another bear spray assault. And the next article is titled, Former Pilot's Career Destroyed. Ex-snowbird captain claims his passport was canceled over employment in China. And this is by Daryl Greer. A former captain with Canada's Snowbirds claims his passport was wrongfully canceled after working for a pilot training company that the U.S. government says is a significant enabler of the Chinese military. Jason Miles Ingram says in a notice of appeal filed in the federal court that he proudly and honorably served as a pilot with the Canadian Armed Forces for nearly 21 years. Miles Ingram says he worked in Dubai as a flight instructor for more than a decade after retiring from the forces and moved to China in 2022 to work as an instructor for the parent company of the Test Flying Academy of South Africa. The appeal notice says the flight company offers pilot training and other services, but he began looking for work elsewhere in 2024. The notice says he tried traveling from Beijing to New Zealand in December 2024, but was denied boarding after New Zealand immigration officers claimed that his passport was reported lost or stolen with Interpol. The appeal says his passport was actually canceled, and the Canadian government refused to reinstate due to his knowledge of sensitive Canadian, U.S., and NATO information, and his passport was canceled to protect national security, as returning it could enable activities harmful to Canada and its allies. He claims a letter from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada sent to his former home in Dubai that month stated his passport was canceled by the public safety minister. Miles Ingram's appeal says he sought reconsideration of the cancellation, which was refused on January 16. The cancellation of the appellant's Canadian passport has effectively destroyed the appellant's career and ability to earn a livelihood as a pilot, the appeal says. The U.S. Justice Department said in a news release on January 15 that it had filed a forfeiture complaint over flight simulators being shipped to China by the Test Flying Academy of South Africa. TFASA masquerades as a civilian flight training academy, when in fact it is a significant enabler of the Chinese air and naval forces and a pipeline for transferring NATO aviation expertise, operational knowledge, and restricted technology directly to the People's Liberation Army. Assistant Attorney General for the National Security, John Eisenberg, said. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said the seizure demonstrated the ongoing threat that China and its enablers pose to the national security of the United States through the unlawful procurement of U.S. military technology. The company said in a statement posted on its website that it strenuously rejects all allegations and implications made in that release as factually incorrect and misleading. The company and Miles Ingram's lawyers did not immediately respond to a request for comment. He claims in the appeal that there's no evidence that he has committed a criminal or terrorism offense to justify the cancellation, or that he poses a national security risk to Canada. And the next article is titled, Police to Inquire About Child Killers' Additional Releases. Durham Chief will raise concerns with Correctional Service Canada. And this is by Sadine Mosen. Durham police say their chief will be raising concerns with Correctional Services Canada in the coming weeks about whether there is adequate supervision of a convicted child killer who has been granted 2 more temporary releases in Oshawa later this year. In an early January decision, the Parole Board of Canada, that's PBC, granted Darren Scott Ray 3 72-hour unescorted temporary absences to be used within 12 months. Earlier this month, Durham police warned in a community safety alert that Ray was being temporarily released for 3 days. He was released on March 2nd on an unescorted temporary absence, that's a UTA permit, and returned to police custody as scheduled on March 5. The permits were granted to allow Ray to become acquainted with staff and residents of a community-based residential facility and assist in future reintegration into society. Chief Peter Moreira will raise concerns about ensuring adequate and consistent supervision of Mr. Ray and the enforcement of the UTA conditions for release, Durham Police spokesperson Constable Nicholas Gluckstein said. When a person is assessed as posing a high risk to public safety, he said Durham Police will issue public safety advisories in accordance with the Community Safety and Policing Act. In October 1987, Ray was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of 14-year-old Darren Pepin in Toronto. At the time, it was reported by the Star that Ray tortured, sodomized, and strangled Pepin to death before throwing the teenager's body in the garbage room of his Toronto apartment. In their community safety alert this month, Durham police characterized Ray as a high-risk offender who posed a significant risk to the community. You have elevated assessments for general, violent, and sexual recidivism and for intimate partner violence, the board wrote in its decision. You remain a high-risk, medium needs offender. The board also noted that he presented an undue risk to society during absences. In documents obtained by the Star, the parole board said that the terms of Ray's temporary releases involve a number of terms, including no contact with the victim's family or to be in the presence of anyone under the age of 18 unless accompanied by a responsible adult who was aware of his criminal history. At an unrelated press conference on Tuesday, Premier Doug Ford said the parole board needed to reverse their decision on the 72-hour passes as quickly as possible. He should rot in jail, he said. We have to overhaul the system. The purpose of these absences is to assess whether a convict could be released into the community to live, said Joseph Newberger, a Toronto criminal defense lawyer. You also want to try and manage their risk by testing them in the community on a short, temporary basis. Newberger also said that unescorted is a misleading term, and Ray is not on his own, wandering around the community, but is limited to strict conditions and timelines. It is a very tight release in order to manage their risk and see how they're acclimating to the environment. This is not the first time Ray has been granted temporary absences from prison. In 2015, he was granted 2 escorted temporary absences, one for compassionate reasons and the other to allow a visit with his parents. Another escorted absence was granted in 2017 to allow Ray to participate in a pipe ceremony. He has spent more than 38 years behind bars, and his life sentence allows for the possibility of parole after 25 years. He was denied full parole in December of 2022. And I need to stop one more time to remind you, you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is titled, These Guys, They Need to Be Shot. Ford praises Vaughan homeowner who fired on man during home invasion. This is by Maura Welsh and Rob Ferguson. Premier Doug Ford has applauded the Vaughan homeowner who shot one of several masked intruders breaking into his home early Tuesday morning, saying more people need to defend themselves with guns. As for the person that was defending his family, he was a legal gun owner and stored properly. Congratulations. Ford said, "Yeah, I'm glad you shot the guy. Teaches the rest of these robbers. These guys, they need to be shot," the premier said. Ford was referring to a home invasion at 12:50 a.m. Tuesday when New York Regional Police say multiple people wearing masks broke into a Vaughan home only to be greeted by the owner armed with a gun. The homeowner shot one of the intruders in the leg, and the group ran outside, got into a black pickup truck, and sped away, police said in a news release. When an injured man turned up in a Toronto area hospital for treatment a short time later, officers determined he had been shot during the home invasion, police said. The 24-year-old man faces 3 charges, including robbery with a firearm. The homeowner will not be charged, police said, because the weapon was legally owned and had been properly stored. Toronto criminal lawyer Michael Korstein cautioned that these legal decisions are complex and depend on the circumstances. The action movie fan in all of us likes to see the bad guys get blown away, but in reality, the premier has to be a little cautious not to counsel what could be perceived as murder or attempted murder, Korstein said. Someone who no longer poses a threat to you, even after invading your home. If the threat is not there, you legally cannot actually empty the clip, so to speak. If somebody comes into your home, if it's in that heated moment when your life is in danger, then theoretically you could shoot them, he said. But once you've either injured them or their back is to you or they're leaving, then it's a no-go. That's a whole different scenario legally. Ford was in the community of Kenilworth on Wednesday to announce a $29 million plan to expand and rehabilitate rural water infrastructure in Perth and Wellington counties when a journalist asked about the Vaughan shooting. The premier responded by commending the homeowner, noting that recent Toronto area home invasions led to injuries and deaths of homeowners in front of their families. Abdul Alim Faruqi was shot to death in front of his family in his Kleinberg home on August 31. Charges were laid against 5 people, police said. On March 11, an occupant of a home on Glencairn Avenue was shot after a group of men entered the home, Toronto police said. Encouraging other legal gun owners to take similar action, Ford criticized attempts by the federal government to limit firearm ownership, then pivoted to Toronto street protests and ended criticizing some judges who, he said, are lenient on criminals. I encourage everyone out there that's a legal gun owner. Someone's going to come in and try to kill you and kill your family. Remember, it was just last week. One guy got shot because he was trying to protect his kids. Well, you know, these guys, they need to be shot, he said. I'll never forget the one family that the man was protecting his 4-year-old kid, and there's 3 other children there and his wife, and they assassinated him right in front of the kids, like these ruthless. They need to rot in jail for the rest of their lives, he said. Congratulations for shooting this guy. Should have shot him a couple more times as far as I'm concerned. People are done with this, he said. They're done with all these crazy protesters and nasty people and breaking into homes and stealing cars. We all grew up here. Did we experience this 10 years ago? No, we never experienced this. People in Toronto never experienced this. People just were so brazen. At the legislature, New Democrat leader Marit Stiles said Ford's comments applauding the shooting were irresponsible. If people in Ontario feel less safe today, then that's on him as the premier of this province, she said, noting Ford has been in office for 8 years. And the next article is titled, PC Stabilized Declining Support. Ford's Tories polling at 44% after hitting high of 53% in August. And this is by Robert Benzie. Premier Doug Ford's front-running progressive conservatives appear to have stanched the bleeding, a new poll suggests. After 7 months of slow decline from their all-time high of 53% last August, the Tories have leveled off at 44% in the latest Abacus data tracking survey. They enjoy a 12% point advantage over the leaderless Liberals at 32% as MPPs return for the spring legislative session next Monday. Marit Stiles' official opposition New Democrats were mired in third place at 16%, followed by Mike Schreiner's Greens at 5%. At least for now, it looks like they've stabilized things. Abacus President David Coletto said Wednesday of the Tories, who dipped to 52% in September, 51% in October, 52% in November, and 48% in January, and 44% last month. The Liberals, who have launched a leadership contest to elect a new chief on November 21 after Bonnie Crombie's departure in January, seem to be benefiting from the popularity of Prime Minister Mark Carney's federal grits, said Coletto. It's driven by Carney. He is absolutely helping the provincial wing of the party, said the pollster, adding Stiles, New Democrats are not being helped by the diminished federal brand of the national NDP, which doesn't even have official standing in the Commons and will elect a new leader later this month. I mean, there hasn't been, probably in a long time, a story that's helped her, said Coletto, pointing to last month's defection of Ontario NDP Deputy Leader Dolly Begum to run for Carney's federal Liberals in the April 13 Scarborough Southwest by-election. Abacus surveyed 1,000 Ontarians March 4 through 11 using online panels based on the Pure Spectrum platform. While opt-in polls cannot be assigned a margin of error for comparison purposes, a random sample of this size would have one of plus or minus 3.1 percentage points, 19 times out of 20. Coletto noted the survey was conducted while Ford's musings about expanding Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport and building a new convention center, likely at Exhibition Place, were front-page news, but before the Premier's controversial decision to tighten access to information laws. His numbers in Toronto show that, at least initially, there doesn't appear to be a significant backlash to his interventions around the airport or the convention center, he said, stressing this is obviously before the Freedom of Information changes that have triggered an outcry in some quarters. In terms of personal popularity, Ford was at 36% positive, 41% negative, for a minus 5% favorability rating, with 21% of respondents neutral and 1% unsure. Stiles was at 26% positive, 21% negative, for a plus 5% rating, with 33% neutral and 20% uncertain. Schreiner was at 21% positive, 18% negative, for a plus 3% ranking, with 35% neutral and 26% unsure. Because the Liberals have no permanent leader, Abacus did not test any Grit's name. Some 41% of those polled disapprove of the job the PC government is doing, while 36% approve, 20% were neutral, and 3% didn't know. And so I'm going to end here now with you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 19 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.